Yo, what's going on everyone? It's Brian and Jim here with DrinkABeerandPlayAGame, and today begins our look at the Shadowrun series for this month. So, we're going to start with the first game released, Shadowrun for the Super NES.
Released in 1993, this was developed by Beam Software and published by Data East. It's based on the tabletop RPG made by FASA. I grew up loving the Genesis game, so being able to play this game, which I didn't get to play as a kid, it's really exciting actually, because I love these cyberpunk fantasy worlds. People seem to love this game, and I'm interested to see if it lives up to the hype. If you want to know more about the Shadowrun universe, click this link in the top right corner. There we go over a brief little synopsis of the backstory and what to expect. Graphically, the game's pretty good. While the character sprites can be a little small, they have some good detail, and for the most part you can really tell the difference between all the characters. When you talk to characters, you actually get these avatar blocks that come up. So these portraits, they look good. And while, some of the more common characters in the game can be recycled assets, they're still really well drawn, and it just gives the game a ton of character. The backgrounds are a little bland. It doesn't really give off the cyberpunk dystopian universe that you're kind of hoping for, but it's not bad, and the cities are pretty vibrant with people walking around, so at least it seems like a living city. But besides that, the boss fights look absolutely awesome, and they're one of the best parts of the game. I wish the Matrix was a little bit more unique instead of just this top-down, grid-based kind of look, hoping for maybe something a little more to transport me to a different world, but I mean, it's alright. It doesn't take away from the game. Ah! What?
Stop bitching about the Matrix and talk more about Drake!
How about we not spoil the goddamn story?
Drake!
Ugh. Truth be told, Drake does look awesome, and when you finally encounter him, you'll know why Bryce creamed his little pants. Either way, we both gave the graphics 6s. It's definitely above average. As far as beer go, I'll just give 1 beer for the boring backgrounds. The sound, again, is a solid package. I actually really like the music in this game. It's jazzy, but stays upbeat. It keeps the kind of film noirish kind of feel that the whole game's going for. Besides that, the sound effects are okay. There could be more of them, but they get the job done. Different guns sound like different guns. The magic sounds pretty cool, so no real complaints there. It's not going to be the best music or sounds that you hear from this generation, especially from RPGs, but it's certainly no slouch either. So when it comes to our scores, we both gave it 7s. It's definitely a solid package here, with some pretty memorable tunes. As far as beer goes, I'll give it 1 beer just because, the sound effects could have been a little better.
Control in this game is usually people's biggest reservations when playing, because it is a cursor-based action RPG. And let me spell out what that means for the game itself. So you roam around the city freely, but when you come to an area when you need to inspect things, you have to drag the cursor across the screen, and then you inspect an item or interact with the environment. What makes it really rough is the combat. Now in most cases it's range combat, so it's not bad, but in some areas like the arena, when you have a target that's moving, you have to try to connect that cursor with him, and it's really annoying. Granted, once you do lock on, it will stay with the target, but if you move out of the way, it'll go away again, so it takes a lot of getting used to.
That's for goddamn sure.
Yeah, Jim and I, after putting enough hours into it, we did get used to it, but that's not to say we liked it. So we definitely understand when people probably don't want to play this game simply for this reason, but Jim and I got over that. So as you see, we both gave it 5s, and I'm only going to add 2 beers just because a cursor-based game really doesn't work for the Super NES, and there was plenty of other types of RPGs out there that they could have emulated their style. When talking about the gameplay with any of these Shadowrun titles, we're going to tie in with the story, and this is a great one. You start off as Jack Armitage in a morgue who just wakes up from what everyone thinks is death with amnesia, and your goal is to find out who killed you. Along the way, you're going to interact with a lot of characters, go through a lot of different areas like bars, downtown Seattle, on a boat, so you're going to get around. My personal favorite is when you get to explore the crypt and you get to fight vampires. But other than that, this is a game that it's tough to separate the story from the gameplay, because the core gameplay, as I mentioned in the control, is really just going around, interacting with objects, talking with people, and the frustrating combat. But we could put that aside because the story is so well written that it'll just suck you in, as long as you're willing to invest a bunch of hours. Trust me, if you try and play for 2 hours or so, that's still not enough time to really invest yourself.
So much grinding!
Yeah. Like any RPG, there is an experience system in this game. However, they refer to it as karma, so you're going to hear that throughout the rest of the other Shadowrun games. Aside from karma, you also earn new in for all the jobs you do. Now with this new in, you can buy new weapons or cybernetic limbs, and the karma can be spent on hit points and some other typical attributes that you would see in other RPGs. In order to get Jake powerful enough to take on some of the later bosses, you're going to need to spend a lot of time upgrading him. So, anyway, when we...
Right!
What?
Brian didn't talk about the keywords. There's a keyword system, it's pretty important. Kind of moves the story along. Probably should talk about it.
I want to slap him, but he is right. One big gameplay element is the fact that when you interact with certain characters, they give you a neat new keyword, and that opens up different dialogue throughout the entire game. So, you're going to spend a lot of time just talking to people, and if you're like me, you're going to get lost at some points because you forgot to talk to, this random troll in this random bar. So you're going to probably use a game guide. But other than that, it's still a great game. Jim and I, we both gave it 7s because we just loved the story so much. And as far as beer, I'm only going to add one, and that beer is for Jack Armitage, because he deserves it after all the shit he went through in this game.
Alright, Originality. To be honest with you, Brian and I are no experts when it comes to RPGs. We've played our fair share, but trust us, there's people who know way more about than we do. But this is the first real kind of cyberpunk mixed with fantasy world that we've seen in the video game, at least that we can remember. You could maybe make an argument for Phantasy Star with its space exploration and its futuristic setting, but this just has its own kind of feel. The cursor system, love it or hate it, it's original, especially for a console, and especially for a real-time RPG. You don't really see this kind of control scheme, and in the 16-bit era, you don't see a lot of real-time RPGs either. And yes, I know, Secret of Mana, I get it.
Jim, talk about all the cool creatures like the vampires and Drake!
Yes, there's vampires. You already mentioned the goddamn vampires. There's vampires in the game. There, I said it.
And Drake.
What you mean, last name ever, first name greatest? I think I deserve that one. Anyway, when it comes to scores, Bri gave it an 8 and I gave it a 9. You don't need any beers, this game's original as shit.
The replayability is one area where Jim and I differ the most in this review, because I gave this game a lot more points since it is an RPG. You can play the game however you want, but I will be fair and say that the character customization is a bit lacking in this game. Your only real choices are how you're going to use Jake. Are you going to have him be more weapons heavy? Are you going to have him use magic spells? And the different type of Shadowrunners that you hire is really the biggest difference, because the story remains the same regardless of your choices. I will say that chances are if you beat the game, you're really not going to go back unless you're feeling nostalgic and want to go through this story. And if you do choose to do that, chances are you probably should just put in this insane cheat code, which is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Putting that aside, I gave it a 6, Jim gave it a 4. I'm only going to add one beer because with a world like Shadowrun, you would have at least hoped they would give you choices as far as character type. Overall, what can I say? This is a game that really pulled Jim and I in. We love the story, and the world is just, it's very creative. Now, to be honest, I had a lot of bias coming into this game because Jim was such a nerd for the Sega version.
Hey!
And he nerded out constantly and was always talking about it. I didn't want to give this game any credit, but a few hours in, it got me. So as you see from our scores, we both gave it 7s. It's definitely above average in our eyes, and we know some hardcore fans might think that's still too low, but it's fair. When we combined all of our scores together, it rounds out to a 6.5. Because of its technical flaws with the control and the lack of replayability, that's really what's keeping it from being a much higher scored game. But 6.5, that's still above average, and it's a game we would still recommend if you are in the mood for a really in-depth RPG with a great story. For those of you who hate grinding, probably avoid it, but for everyone else, it's a good time killer. When it comes to the beer pairing, I'm actually going to go with the Prism Brewing Shady Blonde. This is a blonde ale with some blood orange flavor infused with it, and just take a look at that label. Tell me that chick don't look like she could be in the world of Shadowrunning. Now, putting that aside, this is a very tasty beer, and it's not too overpowered with the blood orange flavor, but it's drinkable enough to get you through the many hours you're going to spend in this game. So make sure you get at least 6 of these beers, and you'll have yourself a good night. But remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly. As always, guys, thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, or better yet, why not subscribe? Till next time, guys, cheers.